Hello everyone, welcome back. Yes, you are seeing that right. I did put a real candle on my bookshelf. Let's just hope my house doesn't light on fire by the end of this video. I know that that's dangerous and I know I need to get fake candles. Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk today about love and romance. I think you and I are on the same page when I say that, you know, back in the day, Cinderella, Belle, Snow White, they didn't have their happy endings until they found their prince, they found their one true love, someone to save them and take care of them. Bella Swan didn't leave her house for 3 months straight because her vampire boyfriend stopped talking to her. Main characters from early 2000s young adult novels had zero personality and they always needed a brooding bad boy to save them. And hey, it's great. We all saw the toxic elements of those classic love stories and we changed stories. I think we've come a long way since then. Now we have stories with strong female characters and women that lead their own whole lives aside from their romantic love interest. So although we have moved on from the archaic prince and princess damsel in distress dynamics that were everywhere in the 1900s and even the early 2000s, I still think that modern romance novels also have a lot of patterns, a lot of ideas about love that I think give women the wrong idea about love, that I think are perpetuating harmful gender roles. And that is what I want to discuss today, the common misconceptions that modern romance novels are still perpetuating. I'm specifically thinking about unrealistic ideas about love and also things regarding romanticizing power dynamics between men and women, but I feel like I could also make an entire video related to misconceptions about intimacy and like spicy things in books that are everywhere nowadays, so let me know if you would also be interested in that. Before we get into it, I just want to give a disclaimer. I do not believe that every piece of media needs to be virtuous, portraying only morally good characters and relationships. Stories do not have to be moralizing, they can be ethically ambiguous. I actually really like ethically ambiguous stories, so I'm not here to tell you what you can and cannot like. However, we cannot deny that we are influenced by the messages that we get from the media, especially when it comes to topics that are a little bit more taboo to talk about, like sex or romance struggles. We often look to the media to get our information because we may be too afraid to talk to the people in our life about it. And when most mainstream media presents romance in one particular way, it is good to have conversations about how it can be different. And that's what I want to do in this video. Let's begin with some misconception surrounding toxic power dynamics. The first misconception in romance novels that is still everywhere is that the man needs to be the dominant one and the woman is submissive. You may think that we have left this dynamic behind us, that it's in the past of all those fairy tales with damsels in distresses and strong princes that will save the princess, but it is still everywhere. It just takes on a new form. The form I would like to call really, really tall man and tiny, cute little woman. May I remind you of the absolutely infamous Ellie Hazelwood quote, "He was towering over me like a towering tower." Every single romance novel will have a man that is like big, strong, and tall. Then the girl is like so small and petite and like so happy. She is the carefree little girl ready to take care of her grumpy man. I think these common dynamics still perpetuate kind of old ideas about gender. That men need to be authoritative and, you know, tall. I think tall is like a sign of like dominance, and the woman needs to be cute. I don't think that there's anything wrong with there being stories about like a really happy, cutesy, petite woman and like a tall man. It's just that it seems to be the only dynamic in popular romance media, and that's what I have a problem with. I think there should be a little bit more diversity there, because now we are very clearly just pushing this one dynamic onto everyone that likes to read romance. Not only does this kind of perpetuate gender stereotypes, but I also genuinely think that this can reinforce shame around women's sexuality, because it creates this idea that there's one thing that you should like as a woman, and that is a dominant man while the woman is submissive, and that there's not really an alternative there, something flipped or something more equal. And women are already shamed so much. This is why in this video I don't want to shame anyone for liking that kind of dynamic, because, you know, women are already shamed so much for being interested in romance at all, for having sexual ideas at all. But I think if we just push like this one idea onto everyone in our romance novels, it can maybe make some or a lot of women feel even more ashamed that what they like or what they want doesn't align with the popular idea. So that's why I say I don't see any problem with like the individual instances and the individual books, but more the overall pattern. You know what I love? This cute little antique spoon that I found at the thrift store. Anyway, one of the changes I made this year is that I'm actively freeing up time to work on my creativity and flex my creativity and exercise it like a muscle. I already took a ceramics class. It was so much fun. Another thing that has been really helping that journey is the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. One of my goals this year is to learn how to use After Effects so I can make better edits for my YouTube videos. I want to be able to make cool motion graphics like this. And Skillshare has a super neat learning path dedicated to learning After Effects step by step, with a bunch of relevant classes all stacked together. Because Skillshare is an on-demand platform, I really like that I can just learn at my own pace. But Skillshare has something for everyone, whatever it is that you want to learn. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives. They have classes on journaling, writing, social media marketing, illustration, anything. Skillshare will help you go from beginner to advanced in no time. I'm really excited that you guys hopefully get to see that I am growing my editing skills over the coming year, I hope. If you also want to flex your creative muscle more this year, I have a discount for you. The first 500 people to click the link in my description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today and click the link in my description. The next misconception, kind of in a similar vein, is that these power imbalances are presented as like passionate. The common trope is that there is some alpha male man who is like strong and tall and sad and brooding, like we've discussed, and then the heroine is kind of submissive. Now, there's no problem with these kind of dynamics happening consensually in like the spicy scenes. I don't mind that, but we're talking about these power dynamics in the relationship. There is always some kind of power dynamic in the relationship. And I think it's interesting to think about how normalized it is for us for there to be a dominant and submissive partner in a romantic pairing. I mean, we even see this in real life, you know, like for example, when a man dates a man or a woman dates a woman, we tend to ask like, oh, but who is the man in the relationship? Who wears the pants? As if we can't even conceptualize that the relationship is equal and that there isn't someone who has more power than the other. And I think the fact that pretty much every popular romance novel still has this kind of power dynamic of a like dominant, more authoritative man and a submissive woman kind of perpetuates or normalizes the idea that there is inequality in a relationship. Let me read to you from this book that I really want to talk about in this video, that inspired this video, All About Love by Bell Hooks. She writes beautiful essays about love and also about how our ideas of love in the mass media are maybe not very healthy. And she also talks about how love is pretty much incompatible with power dynamics, with domination. She says that this like normalization of power dynamics in relationships is a result of patriarchy, of sexism. She says Patriarchy relies on socializing everyone to believe that in all human relations there is an inferior and a superior party. One person is strong, the other weak, and that it is therefore natural for the powerful to rule over the powerless. You know, it is only natural that a man has more authority in the relationship because that is just a natural way of being in relationships. One person always wears the pants, usually the man. Real love is not compatible with domination. Can't we imagine love stories where the romance between two characters is equal? Where there can be passion and sexual tension even without one person needing to have more power than the other? I would like to see more romances that are a little bit more imaginative in that way. And the last misconception within like the toxic power dynamics is how toxic dynamics are often presented as romantic. Toxic and manipulative behavior is still romanticized in many love stories. Anger just means that the characters have a lot of passion for each other. These big fights, throwing things around, it just means that they're overcoming hardships. Stalking isn't stalking, it's just one of them really caring about the other. Obsession is just a sign of deep love, and something that is clearly manipulation will sometimes be presented as an act of true love.
Well, you go out with me?
What? No!
No?
No!
No.
Hey, pal, she just told you.
Why not?
I don't know, because I don't want to. Ella!
Alright, well, you leave me no other choice then.
Oh my god!
Okay, fine. I'll go out with you.
All of these things that are very clear signs of toxic or even abusive behavior are still romanticized a lot in the examples I just showed on screen. But for example, everyone has already talked about it, but Colleen Hoover, most popular author of romance at the moment, is widely criticized for portraying so much abusive behavior in her stories. And why does this keep happening? Maybe it's because we have this idea that a healthy romantic relationship is rather boring. You know, if you write a romance story, there needs to be conflict. There needs to be things happening. No one wants to read a book about a couple having a fight and then healthily solving it by having a mature conversation about their emotions. Where is the tension in that? If you're writing fiction, you need to create these moments of conflict to make it interesting for the reader, and so romances are often full of like toxic behavior from characters to make the story interesting. But I think that we don't have to do that. I think there's another way and we'll get to that. I just think it's so important that we stop presenting this type of behavior as cute or passionate or romantic. Nearly 3 in 10 women and 1 in 10 men in the US have experienced physical violence and or stalking by a partner. This is not a cute thing. And a lot of these romance books are targeted at young women, and it is actually women aged 18 to 34 that generally experience the highest rate of intimate partner violence. In my country, the Netherlands, about 60% of women that are killed by an intimate partner, as opposed to 4% of the men that are being killed. Domestic violence is a very serious issue, especially for women, since it so often can lead to the end of their life even. So that's why it just makes me really mad whenever I see so many romance stories where these toxic dynamics are presented as cute or passionate. Some of the hallmarks of abusive or toxic relationships is that fear of the other person is mistaken for butterflies, and that all the anger and all the fights are mistaken for passion, that the stalking is mistaken for just really caring about someone. Big ups and downs are hallmark of toxic relationships. These are still so often romanticized in love stories. So I think we need to get rid of this idea that in order to write interesting conflict and romance, you need to have characters fight and manipulate each other. That in order to increase the passion, there needs to be scolding and throwing things around. And it can be different. I think it's a misconception that healthy relationships are boring to read about, because there's always going to be internal conflicts for the characters that can make for an interesting story. A really good example of this is recently there was this new Netflix show called Nobody Wants This. It was a show about a young woman who has like a podcast talking about sex, and she starts dating a pretty devout Jewish guy, and everyone is like, you know, they really don't fit together, but they start a relationship. And actually throughout the entire show, well, until like the very last few episodes where they had to throw in a stupid third act breakup, or we're just gonna pretend that doesn't exist, throughout most of the story their relationship is incredibly healthy. You know, they talk about their emotions, they listen to each other, they don't manipulate each other, but the interest from the story comes from the internal conflict of the main character. She very clearly deals with a fear of abandonment, but also has commitment issues and all of these internal struggles that she is going through, not knowing if this is the right relationship, if she's making the right decision, that maybe she should push him away or not. That is what makes the story interesting.
I think I'm realizing an even bigger fear. It is this. That I will become emotionally dependent on a guy who will one day realize that I'm too much and break my heart. Was that the most unattractive thing you've ever seen?
No.
It's her internal conflicts. And I think this is also very realistic way of writing about romance. If you want to write a romance story with a happy ending, you're probably gonna want to write a romance story about a healthy relationship, and then the conflict can come from the internal struggles that the characters face, because it's scary to date someone new, it is scary to commit to someone new, it is scary to be afraid that they're gonna leave you. Why can't romance novels be more about that? And next I want to talk about some misconceptions around unrealistic ideas of love that are perpetuated by modern romance novels. The first misconception is that the fun and the thrill of a relationship stops when you're together. Let me explain what I mean with this. The general pattern of romance plots or subplots are like this. They start out with a meet cute. Ooh, they're meeting, it's so cute. They have a bit of will they, won't they? Maybe they don't like each other at first. It's like, ooh, are they into each other? Are they not into each other? Then they kiss, and that is like an admittance of their feelings for each other. Actually, when you think about it, like the progression of romance in romance novels is so different from the progression of romance in real life. Because in real life, you would often start with like asking someone out on a date. But in romance novels, it always starts with like a kiss, and that is like the moment that they realize that they're into each other. Then there's a third act breakup, because of course the story needs to have like some big conflict at the end, so something will go wrong, someone's brother will turn up, or someone's deep dark secret will be brought up, something like that, and they have a little fight or breakup in the third act, and then they get together at the end, and then the novel stops. Maybe in the epilogue you can see like a little bit of their life together, but not really. Very few romance novels are about people being in relationships. And you may think this makes sense, right? Because there has to be like interest, there has to be conflict, and there has to be a kind of romantic thrill, and once the characters are together, you know, what is there to write about? There's no tension anymore. The reason I don't like this is because it creates this idea that there is no thrill or no tension or no interest in relationships or love stories the moment that you've gotten together, whereas I think there's so much potential for beautiful romantic love stories about people that are already a couple. And it's often the boring parts of a relationship, you know, like the quiet moments together or the little things that you do for each other that make the relationship really wonderful. And I think you could write a really cute book about that, or at least pay a little bit more attention to it at the end of your romance novel. Because here's another thing, I don't know if you've noticed, but epilogues in romance novels are about one of of two things. Either the two characters get married or they're getting a baby. That's kind of general, like the book ends when they're together, and then the only content that is worth returning to the relationship for in the epilogue is marriage or baby. Like those are the only two things that matter if you're in a relationship, is you get married and you get a baby. I would like to see romance authors do something different for once. The second misconception that I see everywhere in love stories is that love is something that overcomes you. Often main characters in romance novels are like struck with love. They just fall in love even though they hate each other. You know, they have no control over it. Or very, very popular trope is the mate trope. It often appears in like supernatural things, so either with fairies, Sarah J. Maas is a big fan of this one, or with werewolves and vampires. It appears in Bride by Ellie Hazelwood. It means that two characters can be each other's mate, aka when you meet each other, you just have this like overwhelming sense of like knowing that this person is your soulmate, and everyone has like one mate and you're supposed to find your mate. Mates are an intense thing for the Fae. It's a lifetime commitment, something sworn between bodies and hearts and souls. It's a binding between beings. We're bound on a biological, molecular level. It's basically the idea of soulmates, right? There's your one true love, and when you meet them, you just know immediately, and what you feel for them cannot be compared to anything you will ever feel for anyone else. These are all examples of love and desire overcoming our characters. It is something that is completely outside of your own control. It is almost undeniable and inevitable. It's why we say we fall in love. And I understand why this idea is really popular. I once asked, I'm personally not a fan of the mate trope, but I once asked you guys why you were into it, and I remember a lot of people saying that there's kind of comfort in the idea of knowing for sure that you found the right person and that you can stop looking elsewhere, and the comfort of knowing that it's always reciprocated, because if you find your mate, it is always a two-way street, and you know that the other person is also never going to leave you because, well, you are each other's mate. So I understand like the comfort in this trope. This is what she writes about this idea of falling in love. She says, the notion that we fall in love, that we lack choice and decision when choosing a partner, because when the chemistry is present, when the click is there, it just happens. It overwhelms, it takes control. And she talks about how it kind of stops us from taking responsibility for our own emotions and being in tune with your own emotion. She says it is difficult to choose love. It is better to fall. Then you do not have to be responsible for your actions. Like, oh, it's just something that overcomes you. You don't have to take responsibility for knowing what you feel and your own emotions. And this is the most classic fairy tale love idea, you know, like these fairy tale romance stories that we thought we had moved past. I think the idea of like mates is just a rebranding of the whole one true love thing that we know from like older fairy tale love stories. You meet your true love and then you live happily ever after, and that's where your responsibility ends, you know. That's kind of ties into how love stories always end when the characters get together. It's like you get together and then you're done, you're set, and you don't have to do anything after that. But in actuality, I think love is more similar to this idea by Bell Hooks that love is an action. It is something you do and continue to do all throughout your relationship. As Bell Hooks says, love is as love does. She says all relationships have ups and downs. Romantic fantasy often nurtures the belief that difficulties and downtimes are an indication of a lack of love rather than part of the process. She also says, how different might things be? Rather than saying, I think I'm in love, we were saying, I've connected with someone in a way that makes me think I'm on the way to knowing love. Or instead of saying, I am in love, we say, I am loving, or I will love. I love this idea of seeing love as this continuous action that you undertake. Not something that overcomes you, but something that you continue to do. But almost every love story, popular love story idea, still subscribes to this idea of like love is something that just happens to you, that just overcomes you. I think that shows that we still haven't quite moved on from the old fairy tale ideas of love. The next misconception is that love and greed go together. This may sound very vague, but let me just give some examples of how like individual desire for like greed and possession show up in romance novels. Of course, we have the ever-present billionaire romance. This is a super popular trope, which makes sense, right? It satisfied our fantasy of getting together with someone who is super rich, who can pay all these lavish dinners for us, take us out to beautiful hotels, will protect us. There are all these material perks that come with being with a rich person, a billionaire, an amusement park owner. Another way that greed often shows up in romances is that jealousy is still very often portrayed as a sign of love. You know, this whole like, she's mine, no one else can have you, that kind of thing. It is an expression of greed. And I just want to talk about Bell Hooks's ideas on greed and love, because what she beautifully does is show us that love and greed don't go together, but that greed is completely integrated into our current individualistic society. So individualism is the idea that nowadays, at least in Western societies, we're very focused on ourselves, on our egos, on making sure that we get the best that we need. And Bell Hooks links this idea of individualism to the emotion of greed, which makes sense because greed is all about taking things for yourself. But greed is opposite to love. Prime examples of greed are consumerism, always wanting more money, hustle culture. She also mentions gambling and addiction. All these things lead to lying to family members and friends, not being fully present with loved ones, always being focused on yourself and not on the people around you, putting your work over your friends. Greed is something that is very individual, very egotistic, whereas love is supposed to be communal, focused on other people around you. So greed and love don't go together. They're like two opposites of a scale. And Bell Hooks says, because we live in a society that really encourages greed and focusing on ourselves and getting more for ourselves, we are having less space for love and focusing on the people around us. She says the message we get is that everybody wants to have more money to buy more things, so it is not problematic if we lie and cheat a bit to get ahead. Unlike love, desires for material objects can be satisfied instantly if we have the cash or the credit card handy. Concurrently, when it comes to matters of the heart, we are encouraged to treat partners as though they were objects we can pick up, use, and then discard and dispose of at will, with the one criteria being whether or not individualistic desires are satisfied. People turn to mass media for answers. The mass media is the primary vehicle for the promotion and affirmation of greed. There's little information offered about the establishment and maintenance of meaningful relationships. And after I read that, I now see this everywhere in romance novels of today's day and age. It's almost as if when we try to like get away from this whole like, oh, the girl is completely dependent on the man, we went all the way to the other side where it's all like, she's a girl boss, she doesn't need anyone, it becomes really individualistic, and therefore we are now writing romance stories that are full of individualism, which also doesn't go together with love. I will say, and I just thought about it, but many like super duper cliche romances, I'm talking about Hallmark style romances, don't have this idea of greed, because They're often about like, oh, small town, romance story, workaholic girl from the city comes home to her town of apple picking, and then she has to like reconnect with her inner self by going to the apple orchard, and there she meets this like gruff farmer guy who will teach her the meaning of loving your family and helping your neighbors. However cliche they are, they do teach this message of love being a communal thing and not just being individualistic pursuits. So and the last misconception that is still everywhere is the idea that there is something like the one, a person that meets all your needs. And you may be watching this and thinking, I'm pretty sure we left that behind, right? Back in the day, it was super literal. We had true love's kiss. The curse can only be broken if our princess kisses like her soulmate, who happens to be the prince. Nowadays, we don't have something as literal as that anymore, but I see it often in like the language that is used around usually our female main character looking at our male love interest. It's always like she's been searching for so long, no man has ever really made her feel anything, but now this one guy that she's met is like completely different from anything else she's experienced. And I think this is just like the modern way of the one true love trope, where it's more like a wow, this man is like perfect and ideal compared to every other man on earth. And I understand why that exists. I understand why many women want to feel like that, because it can be barren and hard out there. But the thing is, love in reality doesn't really thrive on idealization and looking for perfection. In reality, love thrives on mutual growth. Like we've already talked about, this idea of love as an action, something you do, something you work on. And I genuinely think that looking for this like one true soulmate person can make dating a lot harder, because we're not really focusing on making connections with people. Instead, we're focusing on finding someone that fits this perfect idea of the perfect partner. This concept of the one becomes like a keyhole through which you peer at others, unable to see their true shape. And because of that, you can stop seeing people as humans and someone that you can truly connect to. So yeah, I still think this concept of the one ideal partner is still everywhere in modern romance, and I would like to see it leave. I think the bottom line of what I'm trying to say with this video is that I would just like to see a little bit more diversity in the way we create and write stories about love, so that we can stop creating these very false expectations or normalize kind of problematic dynamics in relationships. Obviously, everyone has different ideas on what love should be and what love is, so these are just the misconceptions that I personally see in romance. I would actually be so interested in hearing what you guys see as misconceptions in love stories, and maybe some of these things that I talked about in this video you think aren't misconceptions at all and actually are a part of love. I'm genuinely really interested in hearing your guys' thoughts. If you enjoyed this video and would like a part 2 to it, give this video a like and let me know in the comments, because like I said, I am considering making another video like this focused on like misconceptions about intimacy that you see everywhere in romance stories. I feel like I rambled a lot in this video, so I hope it was at least a little bit coherent. I think I'm just going to end this video with a shout out to my Patreon members, and especially my elite Patreon members, and a warm welcome to our newest elite member, Diamond. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you soon in another video very soon. Goodbye!